Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Authors Vox. Today, I am joined by Miranda, the author of The Adventures of Venus Vortex, an excellent sci fi series that's very episodic in nature and, quite frankly, one of the funniest books I've read in quite some time. Miranda, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Miranda Dietz. I'm a sci-fi and fantasy author. I'm from Buffalo, New York, and a lot of my books are set in, well, all my books are set in Buffalo, I guess, except for in the future.
Fair.
So,
I
yeah.
I will say that I did not pick up on Buffalo right away because you mentioned Tim Hortons and things like that, and I was like, oh, maybe she's from Canada. No, it was Buffalo. I was wrong.
Yeah.
Um, So I ask everyone who's on the pod for the first time, which yourself included in this case, the same question. That question is, what is your favorite magic system? Now, this can be from books, video games, TV, movies, board games, etc.
I definitely have to go with The Legend of Zelda because it's very simple.
Nice.
You find a sexy fairy, she gives you some magic. Doesn't need to be much more complicated than that.
I'm glad you said that. I love the Legend of Zelda. In this room somewhere, there's a bunch of Legend of Zelda stuff, but it's right behind me on the bookshelf behind me.
Yeah, I
But
don't know if you can see like all my little Zelda things on my shelf too.
oh yeah, I think
Yeah.
yeah, see 'em. Yeah, okay, yeah, yeah, great. I love a
Yeah.
Legend of Zelda fan. Big Legend of Zelda fans over here at Grimoire.
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk about you for a second. How long have you been writing?
Basically, like, my entire life, like, as long as I can remember. When I was really little, like, I would make books with before I could even write, and I would just draw pictures and, like, string them together with yarn and stuff like that. And then I kinda
Oh,
graduated to, like, my mom's old typewriter from the '80s,
hmm.
and, then the computer with floppy disks, and so it's just been, like, forever, like, nonstop.
Do you remember if there was a specific moment, like why you were so inclined to writing, or was there anything that really pushed you towards writing?
I think it was just like my love for TV and movies, and I grew up watching all of like the best like the cult classics, like Star Wars and Planet of the Apes and Waterworld and like all of that. Willow, so like the sci-fi fantasy has just always been just like part of my life. And then yeah, like I'm a huge Zelda fan, and I just like any video game that has like a good storyline, I'm like all for that. So I think that's kind of what I wanted to do with my life was to become a good storyteller and tell stories that are like different, like not the same old stuff. Like we see a lot of remakes and stuff now. And like I wanted to
Hmm.
do something unique and new and funny, but also kind of serious sometimes. Yeah.
Well, I think you definitely did that with Venus Vortex. And there is a lot I could say about this series. I read the first three volumes. I haven't had a chance to pick up volume four yet, but I read the first three basically back to back to back over the course of a
Mhm.
day. Because I couldn't put them down. But listening to you talk there for a second about like Waterworld and Willow and these older sort of cult classic things, was there anything in particular that inspired Venus Vortex? Now, and I can see a lot of like influences from some things, but was there one thing in particular where you're like, I'm gonna write about this?
Yeah, it's kind of funny actually because I started writing The Adventures of Venus Vortex when I was 15, when I was in high school. And there was the Fairly Odd Parents and they had
Mm,
Crash Nebula. Like, do you remember they did like a special
Crash
episode
Nebula.
with Crash Nebula and they were going to do a spin-off and I didn't know this until years later and but I was like but the spin-off never happened. So I was
Hmm.
like, wait, like I want more of this. Why is there no more? So then I came up with Venus Vortex and she was kind of like a superhero, but like young because I was young, and it was more of like a space academy, like just thing. And I also just like really liked Star Trek and
Hmm.
like sliders. In like, I don't know, I feel like no one ever knows what I'm talking about when I talk about sliders, but it's kind of like a portal, like old 80s
Yeah.
thing, like TV show. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like that. And then at the time also like I was like all of my books are like influenced by French literature. Like I have a degree in French lit, and my intro to French lit was The Count of Monte Cristo, and I was reading that in
Mm.
high school when I started writing Venus Vortex. And The Count of Monte Cristo was originally written as a serial in a newspaper, so that kind of like influenced me to do it that in like that format. And as I got older, I was, I wanted to rewrite it. Things changed. so then the inspiration kind of changed behind Venus. I've dealt with like body image issues my whole life, and I feel like it was suddenly cured when I was pregnant because then I like didn't care anymore what I
Hmm.
looked like because I'm like I'm pregnant and I'm huge and like whatever. So then Venus kind of like came from that. Like I finally found like that confidence. So I wanted to make her plus size and just like super funny and confident, and like she doesn't even like notice her weight, doesn't even talk about it like hardly ever. Um and so yeah, so then it's developed over the years and it became more adult. It was definitely not as inappropriate as it is now
Hmm.
when I was a teenager, but it's fun, yeah.
Fair. Mhm.
Mm,
Uh, I wanna highlight 2 things you said there. First is the Fairly Odd Parents, and Crash Nebula, because I get
yeah.
now that you say that, I get a huge Crash Nebula, um, Zap Brannigan kind of vibe from
Yeah.
Venus, and I will say, and this triggered another thought in my head about, you were talking about video games. There's a Fairly Odd Parents video game
Mhm.
where Timmy went to, like, a bunch of different worlds, including the Crimson Chin and Crash Nebula, and
Yeah.
you
It's
got to
so
like
funny.
fight. I was like, oh, that would be great. And Star Trek, big Star Trek fans here. I don't know if you can see it, but Captain Kirk is sitting right there, and behind
Mhm.
my setup here, I've got the Enterprise. Because I reading it, the novel does feel very reminiscent of like 1950s, 1960s, like pulp sci-fi, where it's like
Right.
issue of the week kind of thing. Um, and you said you were inspired by some of these, but was there sort of a moment where you're like, I'm gonna make it episodic, or like the crew of the Barfly when you're writing all their personalities out? Did you find
Mhm.
that you were inspired by these early sort of sci-fi serials?
Yeah, I think that, definitely a lot of Star Trek and just like the original Star Trek, Captain Kirk and kind of his personality. I wanted Venus to be like a little bit of that kind of a character, but like a gender swapped. So like that's why all like her crew is all men except for Azola,
Hmm.
and I just wanted them to be kind of like the background, like the him, like kind of like the yeoman in Star Trek, just kind of like
Janice Rand. Yep.
you're there to be pretty, like.
Mhm.
But that just kind of like developed, But so yeah, so definitely, I watch like so much TV. I always joke that I don't have Netflix anymore because I finished Netflix. So
Hmm.
like just writing everything that I write is episodic. Like even my longer books, like my dystopian trilogy, it reads like it's like a TV show. I kind of write it like as if it's seasons. So like so yeah, so it kind of just is always how I don't know I function. I guess.
Hmm. Fair enough. I will say that it is nice. The episodic nature of it is nice because it feels like if I wanted to put it down, I could pick it back up and like a month later and be right back into it. Whereas some books, I feel like if I don't keep reading, I'm going to forget what happens. But
Right.
yeah, the episodic nature of this does help that quite a bit.
Mhm.
Um, and I will say, one of my favorite aspects of these books, and having read them bing bang boom kind of thing, is the amount of depth and the amount of character development that comes out of each of them. uh how do you plan out like a world like this, like a character depth like this in novels that rely sort of on the shorter size of them?
Yeah, I think that the way that I do that is that to me, Venus is just one story. Like it's I don't really write it as if it's one book, two book, three book. You know what I mean? Like it's all part of
Hmm.
like one overall thing. It's just split up into like easier to digest kind of portions. But it like when I sat down to outline it, I had the entire like the base of how it was going to end, and kind of like Venus's tragic backstory, which you haven't gotten to yet because that's in volume 4. I've been hinting at that forever, so it's just been kind of, yeah, it's just like one like overall thing, and I'm like teasing things like throughout, so it's kind of like a fun series to reread because then you will pick up on like all of these things.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. That's actually that's great because there's a part later that I feel like I wouldn't have picked up on if I hadn't read them so close together, but and wasn't looking for specific things, but I'll get to that question in a bit. I do want to
Mhm.
talk about though the crew themselves. Now, any good space opera, any good space setting relies on a cast of characters. It can't just be one guy. It has to be a few people. And you have Azola, you have Eric, Piers, the dogs whose names I can't remember at this very moment, but you
Yeah.
have the crew, and the crew is like a centerfold piece. How many of them stayed? Because they're so very interesting, and all of them have so many aspects to them that are so interesting. How many of
Mhm.
them stayed the same throughout the character design process? Was there a few that were like really different? Were there a few that are exactly the same? Was there any sort of difference from planning to page?
Yeah, like, definitely the original series that I wrote was just Venus and Azola, so it was just, like, Venus and her sidekick, and then, like I was saying, like, I wanted her to have the crew to just kind of have, like, that, the men are pretty kinda, like, gender swapped 1950s ideals, and
Hmm.
then really, like, all of the guys surprised me, so, like, Venus and Azola have always pretty much been how they are, but then the guys were like a whole they took on their own personalities, like, I kinda wasn't expecting that to happen. Um, Dax and Syl are the dogs. They remind me of my dogs, Jeannie and Zelda, because they're very,
Hmm.
like so I kind of, like they just kinda, like, melted into it because Dax and Syl are very, like, codependent, and so are my dogs, and they always have to, like, be together
Hmm.
and, like, stuff, and, I think that the one that surprised me most, though, was Eric because I wanted him to be, like, kind of this, like, stereotypical, like, book talk boyfriend that, everybody just kind of liked, that he makes thirst traps and he's kind of, like, mean to Venus, and it's just, like and he's, like, dark and, like, broody, but then he has this kind of, like, softer edge that we kind of get, and I think that comes from, the fact that I was finishing writing the final book in my dystopian trilogy, and I always love to throw, like, Easter eggs into all of my books, so Eric is actually, like, the descendant of Yvain from that book series, and so I think
Mm.
that he kind of got, like, a little bit of this more, like, deep backstory where, like, because he's the only character that's from Earth. So there's all of this kind of, like, lore and, like, stuff that people who read my other series will kind of pick up on more, but he kind of wasn't supposed to be like a main character. He definitely was not supposed to be a love interest, and that was the other thing is that Venus originally only had one love interest, and it was Yannick, and then it just kind of I don't even know what happened. I was having fun. I was just, like, going crazy with it,
Mm.
so it's really interesting that he turned out to be, like, her kind of, like, main love interest and also just like almost more of a sidekick than a Zola, because
Mhm.
he's her second in command and he's like always with her going into space and doing all this stuff. So yeah, so it's pretty cool how that turns out sometimes.
Mhm. And Eric
Mhm.
is, in my opinion, he's a great character. I think he's
Yeah.
fantastic. Um, you know, the other thing what I think is funny, and I'll mention this because you said Yannick was supposed to be uh the main love interest, but Yannick doesn't actually show up until I want to say like the final
Yeah, the
10
final
pages of book one.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And then another interesting thing, and now that we're connecting these dots, one of the lines I want to say book one or two, it talks about primordials,
Mhm.
and you mentioned they colonized Earth millions of years ago, which would explain humanity. Was that a connection to the other books?
Yeah, that's something that is mentioned in my other books in my dystopian series.
Mm,
A lot of that comes from my mom is, like she is just, like, the ultimate UFO
hmm,
conspiracy theory nerd that I've ever met, and she's all into this stuff. And then I kind of, like I listened to The Unexplained by William Shatner to help me fall asleep
mhm,
because his voice just helps me fall asleep. So, I don't think I've ever seen, like, a full episode of that show because I always pass out, But,
Hmm.
I remember, like, this one where they were talking about, oh, like, if humans came from a different planet, that, they would've came from, like, Orion, and that the pyramids, like, line up with Orion's belt, and there's in my dystopian series, there are pyramids, and, so that's kinda, like, why, like, Yannick is the Dark Lord of Orion, because
Hmm.
I just kinda, like, went with that, so it's just, like, one of those fun things, and then, yeah, like I mention it in my dystopian series because there are Sasquatches in that series, and they they mention, like, that Earth doesn't belong to the humans, that they're kind of like intruders there. So, yeah, that's just like one of my like weird conspiracy theories. I don't know if I necessarily like believe that to be true, but I love watching like the, ancient aliens and all that kind of crazy
Hmm.
stuff.
All those shows, and Shatner's The Unexplained is so good. It's hard
Yeah.
not to like anything Shatner does, in my opinion. But
Yeah.
I'm also a massive Captain Kirk fan, so
Yeah.
um, I think another thing I want to talk about. We've talked about how you know the ship, the crew. Another thing we have to talk about in sci-fi is the worlds, and worlds plural. In fantasy, world building often just refers to world singular. You, however, have created a lot of different worlds in Venus Vortex and have given each of them like geopolitical climates, attributes, different societies. Um, was it a challenge to make each of these feel unique? You have the one that I think Venus tries to name all of them after herself, and even though Eric's repeatedly like there's already a Venus.
Yeah.
Um, but there's the one like with the magic water river, the ski planets that they keep going to. Was it hard making these feel unique?
Um, Not really. I feel like that's something that's always come pretty naturally, and I definitely pull things like just from like I've just consumed so much like TV, books, just everything. So like the Hot Springs Planet, like I read a lot of manga, so there's always like
Mm,
that Hot Springs episode. So I wanted to do Hot Springs episodes and like have them kind of like have these goofy, like farcical, things going on. And then there's Star Wars and like Hoth, so it's like an ice planet, or like I read Ice Planet Barbarians, so it could be not Hoth. I don't know, but
mm,
I just kind of like take things and then like like the magic water planet where they were, the men and women were separated. I feel like that was kind of like I actually made a reference in that episode or that chapter to my dystopian series because there's like an all-female city, and Venus says, oh, it's perfection, which is the name of the city in that book. So
mm,
and then I don't know, the one planet they mention in the first book, Vesta, where like we kind of don't see that mission where Venus shoots Eric, and they mention it in the first one. They do
mhm,
eventually go back there, and then that's like my water world planet, so it is kind of like I just think of, I don't know, random things. I feel like writing Venus is like just so much like almost like improv, and like I'll joke that like I'm just like all of these voices just chattering in my head because all the
hmm.
characters are so like different, and just like just anything can happen. So yeah, so it's fun. I love, and I also try to like base it sort of on reality. Like I have like a map of the Milky Way galaxy that's just like I'm just like, yeah, it's kind of like over there. And I think, yeah, like
Hmm.
Dax and still make a joke. They're like, oh, I thought we were close to this planet, and they're like, nothing in space is close, but it seems like
Yeah,
it is in Venus. So yeah.
yeah, that was a good joke. I did like that joke. Speaking of jokes and speaking of improv comedy, another interesting aspect is prop comedy. More specifically, the prop of the portal bra,
Mhm.
which is a staple in this. If what an insanely inventive way of maintaining that like mysterious femme fatale, you know, picture of Venus that we have. Um, I gotta know, where did that come from?
Well, it's like for one, okay, when you're a woman, we don't have pockets. So sometimes you got to put stuff where it goes. I don't know, wherever you can find room for. So
Mhm,
and then it's just kind of like, yeah, like that kind of like goofy like Austin Powers, like kind of old humor. She
Mhm.
pulls stuff out of her cleavage constantly. Um, and then it's like an infinite storage, and I kind of like have an idea because like, and I think like you'll probably, I think a lot of people, I've talked to a lot of people who have already noticed this, is where does it let out, where does everything go? Because
Mhm.
I feel like a few characters ask her like, okay, but when you put stuff into the portal bra, where does it go? And she's like, I don't know. I got it
Mhm.
from a weird place. Who cares, So I think that that's like one of the biggest like mysteries in the whole series is like where Venus's portal bra leads to, and that'll be really fun to reveal in the final book, which I'm almost done writing. Um, but yeah, it's just like one of those things. Like I've had people say all the time that they wish that they had Venus's infinite inventory. So
Mhm.
it's pretty fun.
Fair. Um, on the heels of that, I would say most people classify, like you mentioned, Ice Planet Barbarians. That's like a
Mhm,
romantasy, erotica
right.
kind of book. Your book, I would say, isn't necessarily romantasy so much as what I would classify as raunchy comedy. Because there's like romantasy is one thing, but what we have in Venus is a lot of you know, implied explicit scenes.
Mhm.
Is it challenging sort of bending that boundary between the implied and the explicit?
I think it's not. I think it's something that comes natural to me because again, like with the amount of like TV movies, everything is implied. Like
Mhm.
when you're watching like Xena Warrior Princess, like they're gonna make a sex joke, but you're not gonna have a sex scene. So it's like that to me is just like something that just happens like naturally when you're writing. I say that everything that I write is like PG-13.
Hmm.
um, I think that there's a lot of pressure when you're an author, especially like when you're a female author who writes, kind of stuff that I do that has a lot of romance in it. I never market my books as romance. I always say that it's a romantic subplot because I don't want people to be disappointed when they have like that expectation of like the happily ever after. It's kind of like not always going to happen in my books, or at least not in the
Mhm.
way that it would in like a genre romance novel. But there's definitely a lot of pressure. A lot of other authors that I know, I think that most authors that I'm friends with are romance authors, and they'll be the ones to tell you like you have to write spicy books because that's what sells. And I will say that that's completely not true because I sell better, if not, the equal to a lot of my friends who write spicy romance novels. Um,
Mhm.
so I think that it really is just like almost an excuse when people are like, "Oh, well, my books aren't selling because there's no explicit scenes." Well, maybe that's not why. So I think that there's a lot of pressure to do that, and I get the question a lot, like every single time. Um, that I post people, I get how spicy is it? And I'm like, well, it's not because it's not a romance novel.
Mhm.
So yeah, so I agree that it's raunchy comedy. Like I tell people it's like, like Archer or like Rick and Morty or like something like that. Like
Yeah.
not totally romance, but yes, there is romance in it, but I feel like it's more for character development than anything in all of my books completely. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Good pull with the Archer. That I did get a lot of very strong Archer vibes when I was reading
Yeah.
this. I love that show. I got one last question for you about the novel, and then I have two non-novel specific questions.
Mhm.
You said you're writing the last one, and I know there are two more coming. So is number five the last one, or are you doing? Is it number six?
Yeah, so number 5 is the last one. So number 4 is the one that just came out, this
Hmm.
past week, and then the 5th one is going to be the final one. I wanted to do, 52 chapters because I was releasing it on Patreon weekly, so I wanted, like, 1
Mm,
chapter a year. So, the final book is going all of them have 10 chapters, the final book has 12 chapters, so it's a little bit longer, and then I'm hopefully going to have, like, a hardcover omnibus that has all of the books in, if it doesn't end up being too long, because I just found this out that there's like a page limit for books that you can print with Amazon.
Huh.
So I'm I'm formatting my books for the first time by myself. So I'm it's like one of those things I kind of have to like just see how it goes. But yeah, so Venus is going to be done, but there is some spin-off, potential in the future.
Mhm.
I've thought about doing like kind of like a reboot where they're older, and that would be really fun to do sometime in the future. I also get a lot of people who want Voltaire to have a spinoff, and like
Yeah.
I mean, like I love Voltaire. I think that he's my favorite character.
Mhm.
So I mean, like that would be something that I would maybe think about. So yeah, so for now, Venus is gonna be done. I have, a fantasy book that I'm gonna be working on for 2027. So, I have to, like, expand my fantasy backlist because right now I only have my book Fairy Therapy, and then everything else
Mhm.
is sci-fi. So, yeah.
Fair.
Mhm,
Um, okay. That I
mhm.
mean, 5, I'm a little yeah, I'll say I'm not gonna say I'm not disappointed. I like Venus. I could read 10 more of her.
Yeah.
But I got 2 more questions for you here until we get to the would you rathers. But first up, you said, earlier you mentioned you were pregnant, so you by assumption have children. So
Mhm,
currently, I would hope that North America has a massive literacy crisis going on. Like it is literacy rates are lower than ever, and I'm in Canada, you're in the States. We're
mhm,
not doing well. We're not doing as well as we should. Let's say you're invited in front of a English classroom.
mhm.
That's elementary, primary, secondary, or college, either or. And one student asks you to give one good reason why you should read and why they should read and write more. What would you tell them?
I would say that reading and writing it's just such a good way to like to learn. It's I think that people think like, oh, like okay, I read a textbook, I learn about what mitosis is. But if you read like a fantasy novel or sci-fi novel, you're learning more about, like human connection and why people are the way that they are and like psychology and all of that. It just kind of like comes out in storytelling. So I feel like the more you read, the more you learn, and the more you learn about people and yourself. And same thing with like writing, it's like such a good way to process things. My book Fairy Therapy, I wrote in like a very dark time when I was grieving, and I feel like it's just such a beautiful book because of that, because it was just like I just turned something really dark into something beautiful, and I think that it's amazing that writing can do that. And I would say to read everything and not just stick to one genre. Like I read classics, I read sci-fi, I read the romantasy, the smut, the whatever, and I read a book
Hmm.
about salt because some hot guy on the internet told me to. I don't know, like
Hmm.
so that's what I would tell the kids. And I have a daughter and she's only a year and a half and she just like loves books. I take her to the library every week and it's just so fun to like see that and to see like how she doesn't even care about TV. She's like, I'll read the Baby Beluga book 50 times and be content with that. So I hope that that
Hmm.
sticks with her as she gets older.
Yeah, absolutely. I would
Mhm.
hope so too. Reading is such a thing we can't afford to lose now in the days of generative AI. My last question for you, and now correct me if I'm wrong. Self-published, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay,
I am.
so then this question uh, is great because if we have someone listening and they're looking to self-publish,
Mhm.
or someone's listening and they really want to do what you've done, what advice would you give them?
I would tell them that I think that community is like the biggest thing when it comes to indie publishing. When I first started with self-publishing, I didn't know anything. I didn't know like how to do all I knew was that I wasn't going to let someone tell me whether or not I could publish my book. Like it was happening, you know. Um, but there's just so much that goes into it with like there's there's art and there's covers and there's formatting and there's marketing and there's just so much. So I'm really happy that I found this like really great community of other indie authors. I have friends that have been writing books for like 20 plus years. I've been doing it, they all have great advice. Everyone helps each other. Everyone kind of beta reads for each other, edits for each other. We all have different skills. I have a lot of author friends who are also artists who will draw character art. Like there's some authors who spend like hundreds of dollars on character art, and so I'll just like message my friend and be like, "Hey, you want to draw Venus looking like Sailor Moon? That'd be great." So it's one of those things that just like being connected to other people who are in the same community. I mean, especially with all the AI and all of that stuff, it's nice to have like that human connection and to really, I mean, when you think back on like all those old authors like Hemingway and Ian Fleming and Roald Dahl were all like friends. And um so yeah, so I think that that's like the biggest thing is um making friends, asking each other for advice, not being competitive, even though some are, but yeah, it's definitely
Mhm.
important.
That's good. That is good. The community that authors established has actually surprised me quite a bit. Having started this, I did not know that it was as big as it was, which is good. I'm glad that there is something out there like that. Uh, that's all the structured questions I have for you.
Mhm.
And now we have our 10 rapid fire questions. So I'm going to throw 10 questions at you. Quick time. You just say either or. You don't have to give a reason. Sometimes when I say you don't have to give a reason, people still give reasons. You don't have to give a reason. Just both is an acceptable answer. Neither is an acceptable answer. I will take whatever. But are you ready?
Okay, yeah, I'm ready.
All right, let's do this. First up, pen and paper or computers to write?
Computers.
Microsoft Word or Google Docs?
Google Docs.
Edit as you go or when you're finished?
When I'm finished.
Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Movies or TV?
TV.
Live action or animated?
I just both. Yeah, that's
Mm.
a both.
Board games or card games?
Card games, like Warbles.
um, uh, what was I gonna say?
I got you
Oh,
distracted thinking
I
about
lost it.
Warbles.
You did distract me with the warbles. This is true. Hang on, I have them right here. The oh yeah, long novels or short novels?
um, it's either or. Yeah, both.
Both.
Yeah.
Serials or one shots?
What? Um, I mean, ugh, I feel like one standalone. Yeah, but I guess okay. I'll say both. I'm gonna say both. That one's too hard.
Fair enough. Um, finally, beach day or camping trip?
Oh, neither. No, I
Neither.
don't. I don't. I
Totally
don't want
fine.
to go outside.
Fair enough. Fair
Yeah.
enough. Last question. Twilight Princess or Ocarina of Time?
Ocarina of Time, for
Good
sure.
choice. That was the right choice.
Oh yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, that was 10 rapid fire questions with Miranda, author of The Adventures of Venus Vortex. Miranda, thank you so much for being here today. Is there anything you'd like to promote before we say goodbye?
Um, Not really much going on other than Venus 5 is coming out in October. So I'm getting excited for that. My other books, Out of Perfection, is a dystopian trilogy that's complete. You can read the whole thing. My standalone fantasy novel, Fairy Therapy, just got a new cover and it's gorgeous by the same artist who did all of my Venus covers. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for being here. And if you're listening and you haven't read The Adventures of Venus Vortex, I strongly suggest you do. They are fantastic. If you like old school sci fi, if you like women like Venus, if you like really anything that is on the cover or anything that's on Miranda's Instagram about Venus Vortex, you'll love these
Mm,
books. So, Miranda, thank you so much for being here and stay magical, my friends.
thanks.